Hi, my name is Jason Barkley, founder of Precision Massage and Healing, and I have some critical insights that I hope can help prevent civil war and, more importantly, heal the disease that's been plaguing our nation in history books since time immemorial. I myself was born into a cult, so I know exactly what it's like to love something so deeply, to believe in something so deeply that the entire internet is the enemy, that all evidence against one side is just hearsay. Or fabrications or fake news, and even just the slightest of rumors against the other side is believed with ferocity. We have to remember that we as human beings already suffer from cognitive bias, where our brain is always trying to help us survive, but is always trying to also save us from wasted energy. So it's going to look for things that require less energy to get to a same conclusion. Meaning that when it comes to logic and thought processes, our brains are going to try to gravitate towards things that we already understand. And that's one of the things that we have to learn. Like, it's annoying to try and understand the other side. And that annoyance has been growing and growing and growing since the creation of our country. Like, the current president is not the disease, he is the symptom. Of growing divides, and it's just hit a tipping point where both sides feel that there's just no coming back. And it's no longer, it's for a long time now, it's not been about how can we work together, it's been about how can we strategically overcome the other side. But we're getting into more and more of this phase where it feels like we have to reply with extreme actions on one side, with extreme actions from the other. So at the same time that each side is digging in deeper to their own thought processes and publishing new books and talk shows and whatnot that help each other dig themselves deeper instead of actually push solutions that can help prevent civil war, disease, unrest, so on. Recessions beyond just artificially inflating it with ungodly amounts of historic support from the Federal Reserve, the current blank check support of bonds that was done only a few months ago for the pandemic. Crazy times. And before we go forward too much, we also have to understand that in addition to cognitive bias, we all also suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the less intelligent we become, the more woke we think we are. As an example, I once had a client who I was talking about self-improvement and healing and whatnot. And he's like, oh yeah, no, I'm all for healing. And if me and my wife are still together at the end of it, then so be it. And I said, dude, if you're not becoming more patient, more loving, more understanding, you're not growing, you're shrinking. And that's another one of the problems that we face, is too often we as human beings replace the idea of being a dick or shouting or anger as self-improvement or activism. It's not. Because anything that anger and stress touches will turn into that good intention into a cautionary tale. But with those two things in mind, it's important to understand that we as human beings, we're not a perfect creation. We have systems and flaws that, without understanding them, we are guaranteed to fall into deeper and deeper divides of cultism, war, and aggression. And with that in mind, I want to share the solutions to cultism. And the solutions are simpler than you think. Like, it's tough to deal with a cult because you can't attack it. You can't, show them evidence against it. It's all fabricated. It's all justified. But what you can do for a cult is you have to remember that cults are never started just to be extreme or to hate immigrants. Like, no one can start a cult just to kick out illegals. It might get a few followers, but not to a national scale. There's always going to be an initial message. And with Trump, before all of his hateful rhetoric and everything that we knew about him, had a powerful speech saying that, the media is biased, our government is not looking out for you. All of these things that we as Americans have been feeling that were true, but no one would really say. And then finally he comes along and says the things that people have been worried about. Who was actually responsible for those things that we've been worried about is a totally other issue. But with cults, it's important to understand what was the moment that they fell in love. What were the messages? And the messages that made people fall in love with Trump was not his comment that Mexico is not sending you its best, you and me. It's sending you its rapists, its thugs, its so on forth. And some of them, I assume, are good people. It's a famous quote that even people on the right have a hard time admitting that his qualification of some was a problem. It's funny, that quote wouldn't have been nearly as nasty if he didn't qualify it with some, I assume, are good people. That's kind of when he showed his colors. But obviously I don't want to make this about history, because all of you out there are going to be better at history than I am. But just from my own viewpoint real quick of what it's like to be in a cult. And I mean, beyond the summary of not being able to listen to the other side, imagine just knowing something with such indisputable certainty that it doesn't matter what the truth is. This is a really crude summary, but that's basically it. Imagine just believing in something or someone who you believed is so holy, whether imperfect or perfect, that it no longer matters. Or being so afraid of something else that it doesn't matter how much of a monster is above you. For me, the one thing that made it really hard for me to leave my cult before was that I simply believed I would never be accepted. That no group or organization would ever accept me and my crazy ideas. Partly because they were crazy too. And if I had known that others didn't hate me for being a part of that group, I would have been able to leave far sooner. And one of the mistakes that we're making hardcore right now is that when people who voted for Trump or who are supporting Trump want to come out and say, I feel I made a mistake. It's beyond me why people on the left want to say, no, you made your bed, you sleep in it. You cannot be a part of society again. That's how you make cults grow. To help get people out of cultish mentalities. And again, in America, it doesn't matter who people vote for. We just don't want people to vote and support them to a cultish degree where we have to wonder if Trump asks his supporters to open fire on Americans, will they do it? Once we get to that point, we have to realize something is wrong and pull back a little bit. But to help defuel the cultish mentality part, first the cultish leader is going to do their damnedest to make their own accusations the same as on their people. It's going to make their own success the same as the people. And Trump openly said at his rallies, they're indicting us. They're attacking us. When no, the investigations were only against Trump. But that's how cultism works. You want the masses to just feel like one. And when the leader is attacked, all is attacked. But if any one of them are attacked, well, that's just collateral damage. Like the supporter that Trump said, hey, if you punch the media, I'll pay for your legal costs and medical bills. And that his follower, ended up punching him, and then Trump wasn't there for them. That's an ultimate example of who Trump is as a person. He pretends to be this tough guy, fighter, when he's a coward. And when you're trying to talk to cults, it's even more important to recognize the things that are hurting them. the things that are driving them away from the Democratic Party. Like, politics should not be this thing of just shouting talking points at each other. Then you might as well get to this list that I have. And again, if we don't address this list as Democrats, if we don't own it and take responsibility for it, then we are directly responsible for the exploding fuel of cultism on the right. Like, this isn't a video of me trying to preach to the choir. I'm a registered independent leaning Democrat, but I've always been a Democrat. But I truly believe that the answer to handing cultism and radicalism is being willing to take responsibility and addressing the things that you may have done wrong, whether or not they were out of good intentions. I mean, stress and anger is what makes our good intentions cautionary tales. Like, for example, the Me Too movement should have been done long ago. I mean, it's almost embarrassing how long it took us as a society to give women equal rights. And they're still not quite there. They're still not quite getting paid for doing the same work. And I think part of that is that as a society, we make the mistake of seeing anger as strength when it's the opposite. Anyone can throw a fist, but it takes real guts to walk into a group and help them heal. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much. But obviously the Me Too movement was called for and it was needed. But the way it was done in response, I believe it was to the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, a whole movement about women's rights just in response to one person, immediately hurts it. And I believe Al Franken stepped down just from one unproven allegation. And then once Brett Kavanaugh got up, I believe he took his seat back 2 weeks later, or maybe he didn't. But it was done badly, and we have to be willing to say that. Like, it's kind of tough for me to be an independent willing to say things that neither the left or the right are going to like. Either know everyone's going to hate me, or God knows what's going to happen. But this is the only pattern. I swear, as from my own experience, lifetime experience of what it's like to be in a cult. If, there were real things that my group worried about, like, I don't want to say too much because you can guess what it is. And that's a whole other topic. But seriously, like, we have to recognize that we went a little too hard with Me Too, and, a lot of people would say, oh, do men feel afraid now? No, that's too bad. That's meeting anger with in-kind feelings, which is only going to fuel the cultism on the right. And we also have to remember that only some Trumpists, maybe a high percentage, maybe 5%, were laughing at leftists for being sad that Hillary lost. We don't all have to now laugh at Trump supporters. And we have to communicate to Trump supporters. Like Biden was great when he said, hey, I'm representing both left and right. But then he kind of messed it up when he said, I know how you're feeling. I lost once too. That's not why they're upset. That's not why some of them are suicidal. That's not why some of them are willing to open fire potentially on other Americans. You have to be willing to say, like, hey, we're all Americans in this together, and I'm not going to let Trump paint the negative picture that he's painted of you. We have to be willing to start separating Trump from Republicans again. He does not define the Republican Party. The war between democracy and the Republican Party has been going on for a long time, and we can no longer afford to ignore it. So again, if the key thing for right now is just for Democrats to be willing to take responsibility and own things that they went a little too far on. So with Me Too, maybe it's an announcement. Like, if Biden makes this announcement with all of these following things, that'll be pretty epic. And that alone will take all of the fuel that we are worrying might be there that would allow Trump to get away with complete and total lawlessness and turning this country into a permanent dictatorship. Because once you go dictatorship, you can never come back. So one thing Trumpers have to understand is that even though you may want Trump to get 3 terms, that's the end of democracy. Once you go 3 terms, why not go 4? And if one guy is raping the Constitution, so much allegations he's had, what happens when the next president does? What happens if we then say, oh, and Trump wants to run again? Then why don't we do 3 terms of Obama after that? But I digress. So again, the thing that we all, including me, have to keep focused on is if we can just take responsibility on this list of things, own it, and create a plan, then that alone is the only way to take out fuel from the right. So first, Me Too. We have to say, we were trying to protect our women, but we realized that we might have come on a little too strong, especially with the statement that all women should be believed. It has to be some sort of a statement like that. And going forward, we as the Democratic Party want to be the party of law, of order, of truth. And we recognize that in some of our efforts, that in our haste and our fear to be there for you, we have gone a little bit too far here and there. And we promise that we are working on repairing our democracy, on listening to people on the right who are willing to speak and ignoring those who want to threaten us with weapons. Help us bring America back from the destructive and dangerous cultish levels that it has degenerated to. Not because of Trump supporters, not because of Republicans, but because of this disease that's been plaguing our history books of distrust, of anger, of vengeance. So it's hard for me to stay on track. All right, so Me Too is the first one. Defund the police is a second, and it's a very explosive one that a lot of people on the left feel very passionate about. But my favorite argument of words is, let's just say that happens. Let's just say that we completely abolish the police, and all of the gun-owning racists are going to behave. It doesn't play out. The end game is self-sabotaging to the intentions. And on one hand, we have to recognize that our police system and justice system has come a long way. We had racism around the corner of our history. Women only got equal rights just a breath away ago. We are still in our infancy of what it means to be decent, to be, prosperous, to be self-supporting. One thing people have to understand about racism is that it's a self-fulfilling, never-ending prophecy. Racism believes that the reason that we're having so many problems and crime and drugs and economic disparity in our countries and our world is because of a certain race. Well, let's just say that race completely leaves. You really think that whites won't then divide too? I mean, in the last election, we already had half of whites against half of whites already. So the problem with racism is that it in desperation for finding reasons for crime, for strife, for these human problems that we all care about, picks the wrong target. Which is one thing that people have to do, because it's not enough to call people a racist when people are saying Mexicans are rapists, or if they say, I believe that Mexicans are more likely to commit crime, it's like, okay, well, what is that based on? And let's just say, they say, it's my personal opinion. And it's, I have one story to prove it. We have to be willing to say, to tell them, hey, I understand that you have that feeling and that you have that fear. But we have these systems in place to track crime. And I agree with you. If someday those numbers show that for some reason Hispanics are committing a lot more crime, then I believe, yes, we should reply in force. That's how we need to talk to the other side. Not just, you are racist. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. We have to get better about talking. So defund the police. I understand and I mean, my theory is whoever's coming out with all these programs I'm listing, I think they're an implant from the right. I'm just saying. But like, I understand that people are saying that we feel filled from the police system for so long that we're just done. We're fed up. Like, I understand that. But we have to understand, and yes, we should protest whenever cops murder people unjustly. A black man is 4 times more likely to be killed by a cop than a white guy. Like, we do have to recognize those things. And more than anything, protest for justice to be done for cops that get away with murder. Literally. But we should not at the same time start attacking all police. More than 70% of police already suffer from stress so much that they're going to live on showing signs of PTSD or stress for the rest of their lives for $22 an hour. Police don't need to be attacked or defunded. They need help. We can definitely audit their books or see if different areas need could save a little here and there, sure, while giving them more funding for psychiatrists and stuff or whatever for those mentally ill cases, or give the policemen the training that they need to be able to know what to do with those cases while keeping themselves safe. Like, we have to care about policemen's lives. I'm not saying that we don't care about black lives, because obviously not enough has been done. But just because not enough has been done doesn't mean we have to become more extreme. We just have to get better at communicating. If your child doesn't do their chores well, you don't start beating them harder and harder and harder. And they start fighting back. And because they're fighting back, you're making them harder. It's just an escalating issue. If a child doesn't do something well, you just find a new way to communicate it. But, we don't know that because a lot of us aren't the best parents. But it's neither here nor there. So with police, they don't need to be attacked. They need help, the majority of them. And then the ones that are evil, and then when their administration lets those few evil ones get away, which then makes it appear systemic, that's what we should fight against and keep that message specific and clear. Not all cops are racist, because then that does make Republicans the party of law and order. And that plays into the fears of a standard Republican of like, oh dear God. So the left wants to abolish all police. They want to give all convicts voting rights, which I'm not particularly against, but it paints a picture altogether when you're also attacking the police. And by attacking the police, like, if it wasn't for defund the police and the Me Too movement, this last election would have been a landslide. But if Me Too had just been done of like, just on its own, by its own merits of like, hey, guys, be respectful to women, and and obviously like the court systems and justice system, like there's, I forget the term for how much time has passed, but we can't just report allegations either. Like, according to allegations, there has to be a part of, like, maybe it's a new branch of journalism where they do serious investigative journalism, and only if they can get corroborating witnesses or something of some sort of substance, and potentially a refusal of that party to make amends, then maybe they get blasted. I'm not even going to get into cancel culture because it's honestly very confusing to get into. And so more importantly on this list, and I wish I could just plow through it, but I feel like anyone can just make a lot of people's heads explode with their mere suggestion. So, so far taking it, owning up to the Me Too, defund the police, I don't know what that changes to. Maybe it's just end black injustice. And yeah, the guy trolls on the right might be like, end white injustice. And it's like, okay, they have the right to protest that too, if they're actually just worried about the few cases of white injustice by police. But also like Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, they don't play well together. But end black injustice and white injustice, well, that's something we can both agree on. Neither of us want injustice. Because also we have to be conscious of our branding, because a lot of people out there are not the brightest. According to the Dunning-Kruger effect, The less intelligent we become, the more woke we think we are. And a program like Black Lives Matter, there's going to be people who honestly think that we're trying to say white lives don't matter by the corollary. And then going further, we have to get better about how we talk about global warming. Because right now the argument is down to who's more at fault. Is it man, or is it just the way things are, we're fucked? That's the argument right now. But it's irrelevant at the same time, because oil is a finite resource. We don't have to be fighting people on the right. It is true, it isn't, it is true, it isn't. Well, the science is still out. It's not. It's an invalid argument. The argument is oil is a finite resource anyway. And the current oil companies are lazy cowards that are deferring their responsibility of transference of energy down to their nephews and nieces. They're supposed to be these intelligent masterminds who know their business inside and out. But maybe that's their hope. I'm hoping all the oil companies are training up their next generations to understand a multitude of different energies. And I understand with that solar and wind, if you shifted the government capitalist socialism support from oil to those areas, that they become more profitable. So our future is there. And maybe it's not wind and solar, maybe it's magnetism, maybe it's Tesla, like who knows? But it's okay for the first thing that we have to do is we have to move off of oil. It's killing our planet, it's polluting our waters, and it's a finite resource. That needs to be the argument. Maybe it's not entirely just for clean and green energy, but at least it's just pointing out like, hey, that shit's ending out anyway. And that also plays into how, we just need to get better about talking, like in general, because a lot of us can find common ground. Like with abortions, people on the left believe that everyone on the right wants to make abortions impossible after 2 weeks. And I do think that would happen if they cancel Roe versus Wade. But most people on the right, they're just afraid of late-term abortions. And people on the right believe that people on the left want to be able to abort as much as 9 months old. The disagreement is how many weeks. And I think with Roe versus Wade, most states had something like around 2-month max or something. The question isn't should abortions be legal or not. It should be at what point should the only reason for an abortion be if the mother's life is in jeopardy. Obviously a government has no place telling a woman what she can do with her body, but we at the very least, we should be arguing at what point is it too late? At what point, and I think that's an unfortunate thing to say, but I personally think it should be, I don't really know. I personally believe that it should be entirely up to the woman, but at least we should be arguing from, how, as a society, if half of us think that abortion should be completely illegal and half of us think that it should, well, what's the middle ground? How many weeks? Because you can't abort, you can't illegalize abortion if you're not also going to set up that child with an impressive welfare system. You can't say you're pro-life if you're just going to let that child end up in a foster home with a parent who may die from the delivery. We have to get better about how we discuss these things with each other without trying to attack each other and so on. Because it's a hot topic. And when we attack each other, we just alienate each other that much more. And abortions is a tough one, but at the very least, we should be trying to agree on how late is too late for the common citizen. And then even after that point, if the mother's life is in jeopardy, then it has to be an unfortunate possibility. There's only been one case of that, and the right will act and promote it as if it's everywhere. But the better we get to precise talking points, precise messages, and willing to understand the fear and the anger specifics that is fueling the other side and addressing those while ignoring the crazy shit. Then and only then do we have a chance to move forward. And then finally, the last thing that we have to get better at, like right now with, is how we talk about the pandemic. We made the mistake as Democrats to tell people everything they couldn't do. I mean, I saw tons of doctors come out and say, now you should wear a mask and stay indoors, social distance. Don't do anything, don't go anywhere. People can't do that. That's isolation, like in prison. That multiplies depression and it can lead to suicide. When we have... So, I mean, first of all, with this pandemic, we have to be willing to explain to people that this virus is very uncommon in how it attacks our blood supply directly, specifically our oxygen's ability to attach to it, which is why people seem like they're having a hard time breathing when it hits them hard. And also we have to explain better that when you, especially when you're predisposed, but when you get hit by this virus, if you're not quite ready to fight it, it's a huge energy sink. And it is going to take the energy. Like if you've been fighting with liver disease, if you've been fighting with other comorbidities, you're just not going to have that energy to fight those anymore. And that's why we're including deaths of coronavirus with people that have had other comorbidities. And we shouldn't be talking about deaths without including a chart at the same time of just overall deaths over the last year, because you can see that spike with the coronavirus. But if you don't have those two charts side by side when you're trying to explain how this pandemic has caused those deaths, it's not going to sink. It's not going to take hold, and not just from a cultism standpoint, but just from a communication standpoint. Why should people believe that so many people died from this pandemic just because we say so? You know, we have to get better about how we communicate that, so they know it's not just because this entire election, this entire division between left and right, is currently on the pandemic. If you believed in the pandemic, then you're a Democrat supporting Biden. If you didn't believe in the pandemic or believe that the Democrats were too heavy-handed in their approach, then you voted Trump. And that's pretty much what it broke down to. So just by getting better at about how we communicate the pandemic and beyond, that's it, we have to lock down. That alone can take a lot of the fuel away from extremism on the right side. As Trump recently said in a statement, we're going to see which administration, and this was like 2 days ago after it's been long called, we're going to see which administration holds out and wins out. But if it's my administration, we're not going to be doing lockdowns and all these oppressive things that the Democrats are going to do, basically. But his phrase, "we'll see what happens," is terrifying because it's fuel and almost a call to action for his followers. Like, hey, you guys better rise up. This is your last chance. But if his followers were able to believe that this is a real pandemic and it didn't go away, like we should play a lot of endless tapes of all these Republicans saying it would just go away November 4th. It didn't. They were obviously lying. And that's the problem with the right. They're not even coming up with good conspiracy theories anymore. They're getting really lazy and sloppy. Like the whole Joe Biden's bus with his name came up next to postal places and threw the ballots in there. Like, come on, man. Like, at least come up with a better conspiracy theory. But so with this pandemic, you know, we have to, and we also have to explain that we don't want to do shutdowns, but you know, if our hospitals are getting overloaded, then we have to as a society. What we should do, or since we're starting, lockdowns are already starting, what we should do as a society and communicate is, hey, it's not an order, it's an either or. If we as a society can get good about wearing our masks and social distancing, then we can prevent a lockdown. People on the right think that we do lockdowns just for fun or just for being overzealous. They don't realize that the trigger of when lockdowns are called is once hospitals begin to get overloaded. And that's what we have to get better at communicating. Because people on the right, if you tell them the reason for lockdowns and this heavy-handed approach, they're going to be far more willing to play ball. And again, that's the mistake we made. We just told people what they couldn't do, not what they could. And I heard very few talk shows and doctors saying, to avoid getting this pandemic, wear masks and socially distance. But more importantly is staying in motion, not stressing about it, not worrying about it, eating well, treating yourself well, exercising to keep yourself in shape as much as possible gives you the best fighting chance of overcoming it should it hit you. Proactive things. Because when you only tell a society what they can't do, you make it appear like you're the one doing it. That's just the optics of it. Public relations states that if a person or a group doesn't have the reason behind something, they're going to fill it in. Or if some conspiracy theory wingnut is filling it in for them, they have nothing to compare it with. We on the left have not really explained what this pandemic is, how it works. I mean, we've kind of been learning as we go, but we never told people proactive things that they can do to give themselves the best fighting chance. And then, when people on the right say, this is not the government's call, whether or not we do lockdowns and shutdowns and masks, and if it gets me, it gets me. We need to be willing to call them out on that bluff, because the second that they get it or the second they get sick, they're going straight to a hospital. We have to be, in that regards, willing to call people for their bullshit. And when they say, hey, if it gets me, say, all right, here's a do not resuscitate sign for the hospital that we're going to put in the system. If you want to live by the theory of this is a hoax, it's not real, and if I get it, so be it. If you really want to live by that theory, sign that do not resuscitate form. It feels very inhumane to say that, but what people on the right also have to understand is you're not doing anyone a favor to say, I want to be there for my grandkids. I don't want the economy shut down. I want to still keep work going. If you're just going straight to a hospital the second you get sick. Another thing we have to understand as a society is this isn't the only plague out there. This isn't the only virus. Viruses are getting stronger with time, and there's about 10 plagues on rotation. This virus, like for example, the Spanish flu, that's not gone forever. And we as a society have to understand immunology, that yes, getting dirty, getting sick is good for our immune system, but there are times when we have to be able and willing to pull the brakes. And we don't even have to pull the brakes that hard. Like, we just have to all be willing to wear masks and socially distance. That will prevent our hospitals from getting overloaded into a shutdown. And thus, unfortunately, the very people who are the most upset about shutdowns are the very people making them necessary from not following those guidelines. But that's also how stress works. It narrows down our vision, and I can get into stress a lot more. But essentially I can't not explain this part. This was a design that our bodies came with. And essentially, we'll eventually get through this list. And essentially, it ignites this fight or flight system that, in my opinion, was a mistake, either by bacteria, God, the architect, whoever. But it was a mistake because although it's very useful for an animal, where in the moment of certain potential death facing a tiger, it would give blood and energy to your extremities so you could fight or run like mad, but it would turn off your ability to think, your ability to love, your digestion system. It's literally like a sci-fi movie that sucks the power out of every other system, ability to think, and everything out of your body just to be able to fight or flight. And unfortunately today, just casual stress ignites this system and has been shown in clinical studies to decrease cognitive ability and intelligence over time. I mean, match that with the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the less intelligent we become, the more woke we think we are. And it also turns off our digestion. It makes weight loss impossible. It increases aggression, antagonism. I mean, increased antagonism with lowering intelligence alone is very dangerous. Like a lot of people think that when they're angry and strong and yelling that they're mentally independent. They're not. When we're angry, it's the easiest to manipulate us. All someone has to do is shout the same words we're shouting, and then we'll believe anything else that they tell us. We'll give them our support, our vote, just because they're yelling the same thing, whether or not they believe in it. And anyone can do an experiment. With your circle of friends, you already know things that piss them off. Like, tell them something upsetting about the side they're already upset about, and they're going to believe you. That's mind control. Saying things that aren't true to get someone to believe you. Usually for means to an end, sort of a thing. When we're angry, anger is not a strength, it's a weakness. And we have to stop rewarding it and celebrating it because it's backwards. Anger and the fight or flight system, the one, like obviously it has no place in the bedroom. It destroys relationships. It destroys your ability to study. It destroys your ability to hold a job. It's the main thing behind employee turnover. Literally everything that we dislike with our world is either created by or multiplied by stress. But the one area that scientists who are not fighters say that fight or flight and anger helps in is in fights. But every professional fighter, and as a second-degree black belt, I can tell you for certainty that although fight or flight's additional power and energy is very helpful, it narrows your vision and usually get hit by a counterattack. Like you won't see pro boxers be like, You'll never see that because they'll lose. You see professional boxers calculating, trying to stay calm, and their coaches try to help them stay calm so they can fight. We have, as a society, like the movie The Matrix, at the end, where he sees the truth behind everything. And finally, he's able to, let's just say, solve problems. We have to be willing to see stress as the same thing. When we see bigotry and hatred, inability to talk across the aisle or talk to our loved ones even, we have to be willing to see the stress that's in the way. When someone does a dumb move on the road, when someone flips us off, when someone's screaming, when someone is projecting their own pain and insecurities, we have to be willing to see the stress that's behind it, address that first, and remind ourselves that no matter what our goals are as individuals, as a society, that until we learn to address the stress first, nothing's going to happen. Like before every debate, each side should get a massage, maybe smoke some weed. I don't know. But we need to be willing and able to have actual conversations, to understand what is fueling them and address it and take responsibility. And just as we want them to understand what's fueling and pissing us off and address it. There's other insights and stuff, like how just the very word of rich is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the word rich just means you want to hold as much money as you can, which takes money out of circulation, which leads to inflation and depreciation of your own assets. We don't even understand how to rich well as a species. We don't understand economics. In American, since I said it, American economics, we go by if demand increases, raise prices. It's a horrible economic system. The rest of the world goes by a system where if demand increases, then you increase supply and decrease prices. That's economics, is figuring out how to get more efficient, more profitable. It's not about how you can stick it. And that's why certain industries should not be for profit, because like in healthcare, when the alternative is death, that's not, but that's neither here nor there. So as Democrats, to quickly summarize, if we don't know what's going to happen in our future, maybe we overcome the threats of civil war. Maybe we overcome the threat, whatever's happening to the Pentagon. But regardless what happens in our near future, within the next few days, we need multiple news outlets and Democrats to be willing to say, on reflection, we've been talking and thinking about how upset such a large percentage of Americans have been, and we realized that we had no choice but to look inwards. And we are hereby taking responsibility for the Me Too movement. We were way too heavy-handed about that. We should respect our women and not mistreat them, and they should be able to get equal pay when doing the same work. It's kind of a qualification, but it's like a middle ground I think people can live with. Progression. But we should never have said that every woman should be believed, and we want to apologize for that. And we do promise to be the party of law and justice. And some Democrats have started a movement of defund the police, and that program was both mismessaged and wrongly worded. We don't want to attack the police. Police, we respect them. They're the ones who literally keep our country functioning. And I know some people can say their studies against it, but it's true. It's without police, then the truly racist with lots of weapons, what's going to stop them then? There's just not going to be enough enforcement. Police are the ones that bring criminals to our justice system. Without them, are they supposed to walk themselves? We have to think these through. But yeah, so Me Too, gun control, global warming, it's irrelevant. Oil is a finite resource anyway, and we need to calling them out for what they are, lazy cowards. No one's calling oil companies lazy cowards for not transferring their energy source. It's going to be easier to get people to leave that, because no one's going to really want to associate themselves with a group that's being called lazy cowards. And oil companies, when called out for the real reason that they're lazy, we could talk forever about everything else around the issue. But when they're being called out for the deeper reason that they're lazy cowards, it's going to incite them to light a fire under their asses to really think about transitioning their wealth. And we also have to understand that as a country, as a world, that these oil companies gave us civilization. We might not have survived without them. They gave us hospitals. They made our entire way of life possible. And we should not be thinking of just closing the book on them. Like, go fuck yourself. Thank you for your contributions. But our programs of how we transition wealth should include how to keep them in the ballgame, essentially. And maybe they lose 30% of their asset value. Maybe they lose a little more. But as long as our program keeps them in the game, then they're not going to fight us so hard. And whenever we talk about different energy sources on graphics, based on economical studies, we should show the profits per dollar. Profits per dollar. I don't know what measurements we're going to do, but something like profits per dollar, and energy gained per cost for each type of energy, and then possibly projections of where we think that energy or technology can go, including environmental costs. So we're out of time. We can't afford, and I'm no politician. Dear God, there's just so much out there, and it's hard for me to not be desensitized from everything that's out there. But we can't afford to just throw our hands up in anger anymore. Within the next 3 days, as soon as possible, we have to be willing to start defueling the cultism on the right by taking responsibility on the left. The better and quicker we do that, then the better we can actually get to work. And again, as repeating, remembering what I told you about stress. On our website, we say a lot more about it, but just remembering that stress is not so much the reaction to a tough environment, but very often the cause. Just in how, when the Me Too movement was created from a place of stress, it's now led to people on the right willing to do a 3-term Trump, to be willing to potentially allow Trump to fire the electorates. So our stress right now isn't just coming from Trump's radicalism, but we had accidentally planted some of the seeds ourselves. And I'm not saying that we need to attack ourselves. Dear God, we as human beings are already second-degree black belts at kicking our own asses. No one needs to attack themselves anymore. But what we do need to do is to be actually progressive with responsibility and to be moral leaders for our world. And the better that we can address, especially those things, and things that make sense, like gun control, the left is right for, I'll just jump to the solution that, left is right for wanting common sense gun reform, but the right is correct in not wanting legislation enforcing it because of the 2001 Patriot Act, where Republicans made the most brazen example of the name of the bill doing the opposite of what it's saying, and other things that were constantly re-understood to make it far tougher than it was supposed to be in the beginning. So we simply have to create a new type of legislation that cannot be re-understood, that cannot be raped, and where the name has to represent what it's doing. If we can create that kind of representation where we basically can't go erase these double stampies down the line, that's something that I think Republicans can get on board with. But if we pass legislation right now on gun control, there's nothing that would stop Congress, or let's just say in the future, maybe Republicans flip. There'd be nothing stopping them from banning all guns. And that would allow a oppressive type of government, even though the type of oligarchy oppression that we have today is far more crippling than a government could be that's no longer afraid about gun control. But just because that fear of that type of government doesn't yet exist, doesn't mean we should ignore it. So in summary, basically what I'm saying is there's hope. And we may think that we've tried. We may think that, there's no hope. We may think that we may just be down to worrying and praying that we can survive as a species from our floor. We don't have to do that. Understanding stress itself and how it's been largely the reason it caused, and again, just to remind, it sounds crazy to say that the reason, as a species, we've been getting angrier, unhealthier, more agitated, and so on, is because of stress. That's what it does. To fully understand it, you'll have to go to our website, because I don't want to make this thing too long. Dear God, it's already like 53 minutes. But seriously, the summary is we do have hope. We can overcome. And we have to understand that the strongest power in this world is not bombs or anger or threats, but love and understanding and a willingness to get better at communicating, a willingness to take responsibility, not fault per se, because especially in today's world where we care more about blaming others and trying to get them to admit fault than we do about taking responsibility. I'm not saying taking fault will just be more fuel for the other side too, but taking responsibility from the position of just realizing we went too far with this. Our intentions were pure, but we realize how it went against our country's ideals in justice, in evidence, so on and so forth. But yeah, seriously, there's hope. And I think of a person who's never been able to lose weight. They've tried countless diets, exercises, but nothing could really get the weight off because of stress. One moment of stress launches fight or flight for up to 72 hours, and most of us have more stress than that much. Thus, most of us are chronically in fight or flight mode, where our bodies literally think there's a tiger trying to kill us, and it's going to keep every calorie. It doesn't know when our next meal is going to be. So for the person who has never been able to get the body that they've wanted to get, it's because you've been trying to do it from the other side of the glass door of stress. And if you can first work on, from now on, like everyone out there, before you eat a meal, take a second to breathe. Don't listen to the news. Relax. Breathe. And then your body, and try to be as relaxed as you can for the next hour or two. And then your body will only keep the calories that it needs for basic survival, and it won't hold on to so many calories for the long haul. But that's an example of, you may think that your dreams are no longer possible. Your dreams of getting healthier, your dreams of establishing peace with the other side of the aisle, your dreams of having a fulfilling, lasting relationship. But it's more possible than you think. If all of us can just get a little bit better at helping each other heal, helping ourselves heal, then by definition, as in rest and digest mode, we're going to actually be able to get smarter, more intelligent, more able to understand ideas from the other side of the aisle, not just from our own bubble worlds. We're going to get healthier, able to lose weight, able to get the bodies that we've been wanting to get. All of our dreams and the ability to survive as a species literally hangs on the balance of whether or not we learn to understand stress itself. Because only then do we have a chance to understand the other side, work with them, and make actual progress. Because in the middle is always going to be where the solutions lay. Throughout our history, it's been left extremist progressives that have helped move our country forward, and then it's been the right that's had to figure out how to try and work with it, so to speak. Like, Lincoln was a crazy leftist Democrat, and even though the parties have switched and all that, his ideals, like, if we had slavery today, you would be a leftist extremist Democrat. And as far as fighting for equal rights, as far as equal justice, we should never stop fighting, but at the same time, we have to be more considerate and careful about how many taxes we suggest, or how, if new suggestions might become oppressive or just economically unfeasible. Like, dear God, if Democrats can start talking the language of economic feasibly and get trained, and, financial responsibility, and, let's audit the government. Let's find out which areas are wasting. Let's find out which areas are allowing the most outsider trading, or, and so on and so forth. That would be awesome. Like, I, as a citizen, would feel, and this is a tangent, but I would feel better myself if I knew that my government was double checking itself, and that every dollar that I pay in taxes is going to roads, where roads are not, and infrastructure is not being used as a bargaining chip, but something that's actually being taken care of. Like, there should be no toll roads in America. Like, what the hell? But yeah, so summary, there is hope. Do not give up on America. Do not give up on yourself. And no matter how many times you've personally tried to make a difference before, I promise you that by individually, and then as a society, overcoming this glass door of stress, that there is nothing that we can't overcome as a species. And that maybe one day we can make our world truly a heaven on earth that's based on equal justice, prosperity, rights, where the rich can be rich and fly their planes, swim in the jacuzzi on their planes, or whatever they do up there, while the hardworking worker can afford to provide for his family and live the American dream. But yeah, so no matter what, always know that there is hope. We can always overcome. We do have that power within us. And God, all I can say is God bless America and Godspeed.